The air in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Legacy was thick with the scent of money and lilies, a cloying combination that clung to the back of the throat. A low hum of conversations, lubricated by vintage champagne, was lost in the cavernous, frescoed ceiling, where painted cherubs looked down with benign indifference on the assembled titans of industry, politics, and culture. This was the annual Constellation Gala, a universe of self-congratulation where fortunes were pledged to charity with the same competitive zeal as a hostile takeover. Diane Washington stood near the stage, a statuesque figure in a midnight blue gown that absorbed the light rather than reflected it. She was an island of stillness in a sea of restless ambition. At 45, she possessed a composure that was often mistaken for aloofness, a quiet intensity that unnerved those who equated power with noise. Tonight, she was the guest of honor, the recipient of the Vanguard Award for Humanitarian Enterprise, a recognition of her foundation's work in revitalizing inner-city education. Yet, she felt the familiar weight of being an observer in a world she technically co-owned. Her husband, Michael, touched the small of her back. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice a warm anchor in the glittering chaos. "Just breathing the rarefied air," she replied, a small, private smile gracing her lips. He squeezed her hand, a gesture of solidarity that had seen them through 2 decades of building an empire from the ground up, starting with a single distressed property in Detroit and spinning it into the multi-billion-dollar behemoth of Washington Holdings. The master of ceremonies, a television host with a blindingly white smile, stepped to the podium. And now, to present this year's Vanguard Award, a man who needs no introduction, the chairman of the Constellation Foundation Board and a titan of industry in his own right, Mr. Robert Hayes. A wave of polite, forceful applause swept the room. Robert Hayes emerged from the wings, his silver hair immaculate, his tuxedo tailored to within an inch of its life. He was a relic of a bygone era of corporate leadership, a man whose power was inherited, not earned, and who wore his privilege like a second skin. He and the Washingtons had circled each other for years on various boards and at functions like this, their interactions a masterclass in strained cordiality. Hayes gripped the podium, his smile not quite reaching his cold, blue eyes. "Thank you. It is a distinct honor to be here tonight, celebrating philanthropy, celebrating progress." He let the word hang in the air, freighted with an unspoken meaning. He scanned the audience, his gaze finally settling on Diane. "Tonight, we honor Diane Washington," he began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "An incredible success story, truly remarkable." He paused, allowing the compliment to land before twisting the knife. "In a world that is, thankfully, changing, we are seeing new faces in positions of influence, people who have taken unconventional paths to the top. It's a testament, isn't it, to what can be achieved when we open doors for those from certain backgrounds." A ripple of unease went through the room. The coded language was unmistakable. Unconventional paths, certain backgrounds, diversity hire. He was painting her as a token, an affirmative action success story who hadn't earned her place. Michael's hand tightened on hers. He started to move forward, but Diane's subtle pressure held him back. "Not here. Not now." Hayes continued, warming to his theme. "Washington Holdings has certainly made a name for itself with its aggressive acquisition strategies. And Diane, through her foundation, has done so much for communities that desperately need it. It proves that, with the right opportunities, anyone can be lifted up, sometimes to heights they might never have imagined for themselves." The insult was perfectly crafted, a compliment on the surface, a condescending dismissal underneath. He was framing her philanthropy, not as a choice, but as an obligation, a way of paying back the system that had so generously lifted her up. He was erasing her brilliance, her relentless work ethic, her strategic genius, and reducing her to a symbol of corporate charity. The words echoed in Diane's mind, not as new wounds, but as fresh salt on an old one. The gilded ballroom faded, the hum of conversation receded, and she was suddenly 10 years old, standing on the dusty stage of the Northwood Community Center. It was the final round of the citywide spelling bee. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her final word was chrysanthemum. She could see the letters, sharp and clear in her mind's eye. She spelled it perfectly. The applause was thin. The prize was a flimsy certificate and a $50 savings bond. The head judge, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, had patted her on the head. "Very good. Diane," she had said, her voice loud enough for the parents in the front row to hear. "You did so well. It's wonderful to see a girl from this neighborhood apply herself so diligently." From this neighborhood, the same dismissive praise, the same implication that her success was an anomaly, a surprising deviation from an expected norm of failure. That single phrase had negated her months of study, her love of words, her fierce intelligence. It had put her in a box, a neatly labeled specimen of inner-city potential. She had felt powerless then, a child whose achievement was instantly qualified and diminished by the very people meant to celebrate it. A flash of a camera brought her back to the present. Hayes was finishing his speech. "And so, it is with great pleasure that I present the Vanguard Award to a woman whose story is an inspiration to us all. Diane Washington." The room erupted in applause. Louder now. A collective effort to drown out the discomfort. Diane moved toward the stage, each step deliberate. The 10-year-old girl in the community center was still inside her, but she was no longer powerless. She had spent a lifetime forging that feeling into a shield of unbreakable composure. She took the heavy crystal award from Hayes, her fingers brushing his. His hand was cold and dry, like old paper. She looked him directly in the eye, and, for a fleeting moment, his smug mask wavered. He saw something in her gaze that he hadn't expected, not anger, not hurt, but a calm, assessing intelligence that was already calculating the cost of his transgression. Diane turned to the microphone, the warmth of the spotlight on her face. The room fell silent. "Thank you, Robert, for that introduction," she said, her voice even and clear, carrying to the farthest corners of the ballroom. "It's true that I come from a background some might consider unconventional. I grew up in a neighborhood where success wasn't measured by the height of your stock portfolio, but by the strength of your character. We were taught that you don't wait for doors to be opened for you. You build your own doors, and then you build a few more, for the people coming up behind you." She paused, letting her words settle. "My husband and I didn't get to where we are through opportunities that were handed to us. We got here by seeing value where others saw none, by investing in communities others had written off, and by working harder than anyone else was willing to work. Our success is not an accident or an act of charity. It is the result of a clear and unwavering vision." She held up the award. "This isn't for me. This is for every child in a community center studying for a spelling bee, who is told they are good for a kid from their neighborhood. This award is proof that your neighborhood does not define you. Your character does. Thank you." The applause was thunderous, genuine, a release of the tension Hayes had created. Diane had not only deflected his attack, she had turned it back on him, exposing his prejudice with a grace that made him look small and petty. As she walked off the stage, she saw Hayes smiling, but It was the thin, brittle smile of a man who had just lost the opening skirmish, and knew, with a dawning sense of dread, that he had inadvertently declared a war. The drive home was a cocoon of silence. Michael drove their black sedan through the glittering canyons of Manhattan, the city lights a blur of cold fire. The Crystal Award sat on the back seat, a heavy, silent passenger. Diane stared out the window, the gala's opulence already feeling like a distant dream, replaced by the cold reality of what had transpired. "You handled that perfectly," Michael said finally, breaking the quiet. "You made him look like the fool he is." He wanted a reaction. Michael, he wanted me to get angry, to cause a scene. That's what they always want. Men like Hayes. Men who believe power is their birthright. When they see us, me in their spaces, they don't see peers. They see invaders. And his little speech wasn't just an insult. It was a signal to the rest of his club. The Washingtons' home was a modern brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined Brooklyn neighborhood, a world away from the stifling formality of the Upper East Side. Inside, Diane shed her gown and the persona that went with it, in her home office, surrounded by architectural blueprints, market analyses, and photos of their 15-year-old daughter, Maya. She was no longer a symbol. She was a builder, a strategist, a mother. The office was her sanctuary, a space of clean lines, dark wood, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a tranquil garden, unlike the oppressive weight of inherited wealth that hung in the air at the gala. This room hummed with the energy of creation. Michael came in with 2 glasses of water. David called. He saw a clip online. He's concerned. David Chen was their chief strategy officer, a brilliant but profoundly cautious man who had been with them for a decade. He was a master of risk mitigation. And to him, a public spat with a man like Robert Hayes was a 5-alarm fire. "David is always concerned," Diane said, booting up her laptop. "It's his job. He thinks you should issue a statement. Something conciliatory. Glad to clear up any misunderstanding. That sort of thing." Diane laughed, a short, humorless sound. There was no misunderstanding. Hayes knew exactly what he was saying, and so did everyone in that room. A conciliatory statement would be an admission of guilt. It would be an apology for my own success. As if on cue, her screen lit up with notifications. Her head of communications had sent a dozen links. The gala incident was already being dissected online. A prominent conservative blog had a post titled, "Washington's Woke War CEO Takes Offense to Compliment." The comment section was a cesspool of thinly veiled racism and misogyny. But more troubling was an article that had just appeared on the website of a respected financial journal, citing anonymous sources who expressed growing concern over Washington Holdings' high-risk, socially driven investment strategies. Diane's blood ran cold. The timing was too perfect. The blog post was a distraction, an appeal to the lowest common denominator. The journal article was the real weapon. It was an attack on the foundations of their company, designed to spook investors and partners. "Michael, look at this." She turned the screen toward him. He read it, his expression hardening. This is a coordinated attack. The gala was just the opening salvo. This was how their world worked. Aggression was never direct. It was veiled in plausible deniability. A backhanded compliment at a gala. A strategically leaked story to the press. A quiet word in the right ear at the country club. It was a war fought with whispers and innuendo. A knock at the door made them both jump. It was Maya, her face etched with a teenager's typical late-night weariness. "Hey, how was the party?" "Long," Diane said, forcing a smile. You should be asleep. I was just finishing up my history paper. I saw on social media you won a big award. Congrats. Mom. She hugged Diane tightly. You looked amazing. In that moment, holding her daughter, the stakes of the impending conflict became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about boardrooms and stock prices. It was about the world Maya would inherit. It was about ensuring that she would never have to stand on a stage and justify her own existence. After Maya went to bed, Diane's phone buzzed again. It was an email from a name she vaguely recognized: Sarah Jenkins, a reporter for an online investigative outlet called The Sentinel. Jenkins had been at the gala. Ms. Washington. The email began. I was in the room tonight. I believe Robert Hayes's comments were more than a simple gaffe. My publication specializes in deep-dive corporate analysis, and I have reason to believe this may be connected to a broader pattern of behavior from Mr. Hayes. If you are willing to speak, even off the record, I think there is a much larger story here. I believe you are being targeted. Diane stared at the message. Her every instinct, honed by years of navigating corporate minefields, screamed at her to be cautious, to handle this internally. But David Chen's cautious approach and the board's platitudes wouldn't work this time. Hayes had declared war in public. Perhaps the only way to win was to fight in public, too. She looked at Michael, the screen illuminating her determined face. They think, because I'm a woman, because I'm black, that I will be gracious, that I will absorb the insult and stay silent to keep the peace. She took a deep breath, a quiet resolve settling over her like armor. They have mistaken my composure for passivity. That is a mistake Robert Hayes is going to regret. The smear campaign began in earnest the following Monday. It was a multi-pronged assault, executed with chilling precision. The anonymous blog post that had painted Diane as an overly sensitive diversity queen was amplified by a network of bot accounts on social media, creating a manufactured storm of outrage. The narrative was simple and effective: a powerful black woman, ungrateful for her success, playing the victim card. Simultaneously, the financial press doubled down. A follow-up article appeared, this time questioning the financial stability of Washington Holdings. It quoted more anonymous sources from within the banking community who were allegedly reconsidering their credit lines with the company. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation, using phrases like potential volatility and unconventional leadership to sow seeds of doubt among their investors. Diane called an emergency board meeting. The atmosphere in the conference room was thick with tension. The room itself was a reflection of Diane's style: modern, functional, with a massive oak table and panoramic views of the city. But today, the view seemed less like a symbol of achievement and more like a reminder of how far they had to fall. David Chen, her ever-cautious chief strategy officer, presented a grim analysis. Our stock has dipped 3% since the article was published. We've had calls from 3 of our major institutional investors. They're nervous. They want assurances. One of the older board members, a man named Arthur Vance, who had been on the board of Michael's first company, cleared his throat. Diane, perhaps we should be proactive here. A public statement. As David suggested, reassure the market that everything is business as usual. But it's not business as usual. Arthur, Diane countered, her voice calm but firm. This is a deliberate, targeted attack, and we all know who's behind it. A nervous silence fell over the room. Naming Robert Hayes without concrete proof was a dangerous move. Hayes was a kingmaker, a man with deep connections in every sector of the economy. Accusing him publicly could be corporate suicide. We have no proof it's Hayes, another board member muttered. This could just be market jitters. Don't be naive, Michael interjected. His voice sharp. The gala. The blog posts. The financial articles. It's a classic Hayes playbook. He's trying to isolate us, make us look unstable, and poison our reputation. The meeting ended without a clear resolution. The board was divided, paralyzed by fear. Diane's most powerful allies were beginning to distance themselves, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of a war with Robert Hayes. The first obstacle was not Hayes himself, but the culture of fear he cultivated. People would rather stand by and watch a house burn than risk getting scorched by helping to put out the fire. Diane's attempts to fight back through official channels were met with infuriatingly polite brick walls. She contacted the board of the Constellation Foundation, demanding they censure Hayes for his behavior at the gala. They responded with a bland statement about fostering a spirit of open dialogue, and concluded that Hayes's remarks were simply a clumsy, but well-intentioned attempt at a compliment. They were closing ranks, protecting their own. Next, she went after the Financial Journal. Her legal team sent a letter demanding a retraction of the article, citing its reliance on anonymous, unsubstantiated claims. The journal's editor-in-chief, a man who played golf with Hayes every other weekend, responded that they stood by their reporting and were protected by journalistic source confidentiality. It was another door slammed in her face. The pressure was mounting. A promising deal to acquire a portfolio of green energy tech startups was suddenly put on hold. The CEO of the startup conglomerate cited the recent negative press and the perceived instability surrounding Washington holdings. It was a devastating blow, a loss of hundreds of millions in future revenue. That evening, Diane found Maya at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, her face pale. "What's wrong?" "Sweetie." Maya didn't look up. "Someone at school started a rumor. They made a fake account with my picture and sent messages to everyone in my class." She finally looked at her mother, her eyes welling with tears. They're saying Dad is a criminal and that you slept your way to the top. They're using the same words from that blog." A cold, hard fury, unlike anything Diane had ever felt, seized her. They had come for her business. They had come for her reputation. Now they were coming for her child. The unspoken rules of engagement had been broken. This was no longer a corporate battle. It was a fight for her family's survival. "This ends now," Diane said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. She went to her office and made 2 calls. The first was to Sarah Jenkins, the reporter from the Sentinel. "Ms. Jenkins," Diane said, dispensing with pleasantries, "you said you wanted a story. You're about to get the biggest one of your career. But I need your help. I need you to dig. To find the connections I know are there." "I'm already on it," Sarah replied, her voice crackling with energy. "I've been tracking the bot network that amplified the blog post. It's a sophisticated operation, not some random trolls. They're using a digital PR firm called Veracity Solutions, known for its aggressive reputation management." The second call was to a man named Marcus Vance, no relation to the board member. Marcus was a private investigator, a ghost who moved through the city's underbelly of data brokers and information dealers, a former federal prosecutor. He specialized in uncovering the kinds of corporate malfeasance that never made it to a courtroom. "Marcus, it's Diane Washington. I have a problem, and his name is Robert Hayes." "I've been following the news." Marcus's voice was gravelly, calm. "I was wondering when you'd call. What do you need?" "Everything," Diane said. "I want to know who he pays, who he talks to, what shell companies he uses. I want to know where every dollar that's funding this attack is coming from. I know he's behind this, but I need the proof. I need the smoking gun." "He's careful, Diane. Men like him don't leave a clean trail." "Then get dirty," she replied. "Whatever it takes. The budget is unlimited. With Marcus digging into the shadows and Sarah chasing the digital breadcrumbs, Diane began her own counteroffensive. She called a meeting with her most loyal investors, not in a boardroom, but in her home. She laid out the situation with brutal honesty, not as a victim, but as a general planning a campaign. Robert Hayes has declared war on this company. She told them. He believes he can scare you, that he can make you abandon us. He is counting on your fear. I am counting on your courage. Stay with us, and I promise you, we will not only survive this, we will emerge stronger than ever before. She had bought herself some time, but she knew it was fleeting. The attacks on her family were escalating. Anonymous cars were parked outside their house at night. Maya's school had to be notified. Security protocols put in place. The sanctuary of their home had been violated. Days turned into a week. Marcus's and Sarah's investigations ran in parallel, slowly peeling back the layers of Hayes's operation. Sarah, using her tech savvy, traced the ownership of Veracity Solutions through a labyrinth of shell corporations registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. It was a dead end, designed to be untraceable. Marcus, using his human network, got a lead from a disgruntled former employee of Hayes's primary holding company. The source spoke of a secret slush fund, an off-the-books account labeled Corporate Relations and Strategy. Millions of dollars flowed through it every year with no oversight. They were finding the network, the financial architecture of the conspiracy. They could see the weapons, the PR firms, the bot farms, the slush funds, but they still couldn't find the fingerprints of the man holding them. They had evidence of financial manipulation and targeted harassment, but they lacked the one piece of irrefutable proof that tied it all directly to an order from Robert Hayes. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, Marcus called. His voice was different. It was quiet, somber. Diane, I think I found something. It's not what we were looking for. It's something else entirely. I need to see you. In person. The file Marcus Vance placed on Diane's desk was thin, bound in a simple black cover. It contained no financial records, no email chains, no smoking gun of corporate conspiracy. It contained something far more unsettling: a history. Hayes is a very private man, Marcus began, his voice low. He's cultivated an image of old money, East Coast establishment. But it's a fiction. He wasn't born into this world. He fought his way in, and he did it with a vengeance. He tapped the file. Robert Hayes was born Robert Hajek. His family were Czech immigrants. He grew up in Ashton, Ohio, a small, forgotten steel town. Diane felt a jolt, a disorienting sense of recognition. Ashton. My father was from Ashton. Marcus nodded grimly. I know. That's the connection. He opened the file. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings from the Ashton Chronicle, dated from the early 1980s. The headlines told a familiar story of industrial decline. One article, from 1982, featured a photograph of a grim-faced man standing in front of a shuttered factory. The caption read, Miroslav Hajek, owner of Hajek Steelworks, after filing for bankruptcy this week. Hajek Steelworks was a small, family-owned business. Marcus explained, they made specialty steel components. They were the lifeblood of that town for 2 generations. Then, in 1980, a new, more efficient manufacturing plant opened on the other side of town. It was aggressive, state-of-the-art. It undercut Hajek's prices and poached his biggest clients. Within 2 years, Hajek Steelworks was bankrupt. Diane stared at the name of the new plant, printed in bold ink in the article, Washington Manufacturing. Her father's company. A cold dread crept up her spine. Her father, a brilliant and ruthless businessman. had always spoken of his early successes with a certain detachment, as unfortunate but necessary casualties of progress. She had never considered the faces behind those casualties. The bankruptcy destroyed Miroslav Hajek. Marcus continued, his voice barely a whisper. He lost the factory, his home, everything. According to the police report, 6 months after that photo was taken, he took his own life in the family car. He pushed another photograph across the desk. It was a grainy black and white image. A class photo from Ashton High School, 1984. Marcus had circled one of the faces. A teenage boy with dark, intense eyes stared out from the picture, his expression a mixture of anger and profound grief. It was a young Robert Hayes. Miroslav had one son. Marcus said, "Robert." He was 16 when his father died. He and his mother were left with nothing. He put himself through college, then law school, working 3 jobs. He changed his name, shed his past, and dedicated his entire life to clawing his way into the world of the man he blamed for destroying his family. Your father. The room fell silent. The hum of the city outside seemed to fade away. The corporate attacks, the public humiliation, the smear campaign, it all snapped into focus with horrifying clarity. This was never about business. It was never just about racism or corporate greed. This was a 40-year-old vendetta. This was the ghost of a ruined father and the fury of a betrayed son. Robert Hayes didn't just want to beat Diane in business. He wanted to destroy the Washington name. He wanted to visit upon her the same ruin, the same public disgrace that his family had suffered. He wanted to bankrupt her legacy, just as her father had bankrupted his. The coded insults at the gala, the attacks on their unconventional background, it was all laced with the bitter poison of class resentment and personal tragedy. "He's been watching you your entire life, Diane," Marcus said softly, waiting for the right moment to tear it all down. Diane looked at the photo of the teenage Robert Hayes, at the raw pain etched onto his young face. For a single, fleeting moment, she felt a pang of something akin to pity, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. His tragedy did not give him the right to create another one. His pain did not give him the right to inflict it upon her daughter. This revelation changed everything. Her understanding of the fight shifted from a corporate battle to something far more primal. It was a ghost story, a multi-generational saga of revenge playing out in the boardrooms and balance sheets of the 21st century.